In the fading glow of the Byzantine world, where empires taxed the poor and faith divided the faithful, a quiet storm was rising. Khalid ibn al-Walid, the sword of Allah, wasn't just conquering cities. He was reshaping loyalties, replacing fear with order, and turning enemies into allies. Tonight, we drift back to the dusty roads of Syria, where surrender came not by sword, but by trust. Under the Byzantines, their people faced imperial indictions, arbitrary tax cycles that often doubled or tripled the levies with little warning, dictated by the ever-increasing demands of the Constantinople war machine. Forced requisitions, the Byzantine military regularly requisitioned food, livestock, and labor from the surrounding villages without compensation, leaving farmers destitute. Theological persecution, the emperor's zealous enforcement of the Greek Orthodox Chalcedonian doctrine led to the constant harassment of the Monophysite majority, driving a wedge between the common citizen and the imperial state. The jizya, by contrast, was predictable, light, and, most importantly, offered complete protection from external attack and internal theological meddling. It was an insurance premium paid to a new, powerful guarantor. The Hamzi elders calculated quickly. They opened the gates. Homs surrendered without a drop of bloodshed, becoming a powerful, loyal base for the caliphate in central Syria. The people of Homs even supplied the Muslim army with grain and provisions, viewing them less as invaders and more as a powerful, new security force. The loyalty of the marginalized, the peaceful capitulation of Homs was quickly followed by other communities, cementing a critical political pattern. The caliphate gained strength by offering preferential stability marginalized the Jewish communities of central Syria, often subjected to the whims of imperial decree and occasional pogroms, saw the Muslim rule as an unexpected sanctuary. The covenant guaranteed their communal integrity and protection, something the Byzantines, in their zeal for a unified Orthodox state, rarely provided. Jewish community leaders welcomed the Muslim garrisons, seeing them as a stabilizing force against internal unrest and external military overreach. More profoundly, local Christian tribes began to switch allegiance. The most notable were the remnants of the Ghassanids, once the Byzantines' most reliable Arab allies. Disgusted by the emperor's failure to protect their lands and angered by the Byzantines' contemptuous treatment of them as mere auxiliaries, many Ghassanid chiefs realized their future lay with the victorious Arabs from the south. They offered their cavalry an invaluable knowledge of the northern terrain to Khalid. This was a massive blow to Heraclius. His army was not merely losing territory, it was losing the loyalty of the very people who had traditionally formed the buffer zone between the desert and the cities. The caliphate did not have to fight for every mile. They often found themselves negotiating with local potentates who were eager to switch sides for better, clearer terms. The speed of the advance became legendary. Cities like Baalbek and Latakia fell rapidly. The soldiers of the caliphate were not bogged down in endless sieges. They were traveling from one negotiated surrender to the next. Khalid's governance of the conquered, while Abu Ubaidah managed the political and theological negotiations. Khalid managed the implementation, the difficult task of ensuring that the victorious army respected the covenant. This was the true test of the Cephalus redemption. Khalid, was ruthless in punishing any act of violation against the dimmer covenant of protection. Looting was strictly forbidden. Any soldier caught seizing private property or disturbing a church was immediately and severely punished, often with public whippings or dismissal from the army. He established small, disciplined garrisons in the conquered cities, which were ordered to live with extreme austerity. The message was clear: you are here as guardians, not as masters. Khalid's pragmatism served the mission perfectly. He knew that the gold from plunder was transient, but the gold of loyalty was infinite. A loyal Homs meant that his supply lines were secure, his flanks protected, and his intelligence network flourished. The common citizens were now his eyes and ears, reporting on Byzantine troop movements and logistics information that was infinitely more valuable than a few pieces of silver seized from a merchant. He often addressed his men, reinforcing the new ideology. Remember the word of the Caliph. We fight not for a fleeting piece of this world, but for the hereafter. Do not exchange the certainty of paradise for the uncertainty of a stolen coin. When we protect their women, their children, and their churches, we prove that our justice is greater than the Byzantines' oppression. We make them our allies, not our slaves. That is the true conquest. The siege of Aleppo and the citadels pried the final major urban obstacle before reaching the heart of Roman-controlled Cilicia was Aleppo. Aleppo was an older, more defiant city than Homs. Its strength lay not just in its walls, but in its citadel, a colossal fortress built atop a towering conical hill, considered one of the most impregnable fortresses in the Levant. It was garrisoned by a resolute Byzantine commander named Yakina, a hard man who had learned from the failures of Agenadain and Damascus. Yakina refused all offers of negotiation, believing the citadel could hold out indefinitely until Heraclius arrived. The siege began, not as a quick surrender, but as a grinding war of attrition. Khalid, recognizing the futility of assaulting the massive stone walls, used his mobile guard to surround the citadel's base and establish a tight blockade, while the main army under Abu Ubaidah moved to secure the city proper. The city of Aleppo, however, followed the pattern of Homs. Seeing the Muslim army establishing a fair blockade and making clear their terms, the local populace, exhausted by Yakina's brutal requisitions to stock the citadel, secretly negotiated with Abu Ubaidah. The city of Aleppo surrendered by treaty, leaving the mighty citadel standing alone as an isolated monument to defiance. The citadel was effectively neutralized. The Muslim army controlled the city, the populace, the food supply, and the strategic route north. Khalid focused his attention on the citadel's most vulnerable point: psychological pressure. He knew the Roman garrison could hold out for months, but they were cut off, surrounded by a now hostile city populace, and watching their comrades below enjoying the peace of the covenant. The siege was eventually decided not by a siege engine, but by an individual feat of audacity. A Yemeni chief in Khalid's army, Dirar ibn Aswar, famous for his courage, devised a terrifying plan. At the darkest hour of the night, Dirar and a small band of elite soldiers scaled the sheer, towering walls of the citadel. They fought their way into the inner fortress, terrified the guards, and opened the inner gates. Yakina, realizing his impossible fortress had been compromised from within, surrendered. The citadel of Aleppo fell, securing the northern corridor. Crucially, Yakina, impressed by the discipline and military genius of his conquerors, converted to Islam and became one of Khalid's most effective scouts and intelligence assets. The economic appeal, a comparison of masters by late 635 CE. The strategic position of the caliphate was overwhelming, less due to brute force and more due to political economics. The Syrian populace had voted with their loyalty, choosing the caliphate over the empire. The fundamental appeal boiled down to two simple truths: predictability versus exploitation. The Byzantine system was designed to extract maximum resources for Constantinople's endless wars against the Persians. Its taxation was arbitrary, often enforced by corrupt officials and backed by ruthless military power. The Muslim system was designed to guarantee stability, pay the fixed jizya, and the new government's only responsibility was protecting you. Theological tolerance versus imperial dogma for the monophysite majority. The transfer of power meant the end of decades of state-sponsored persecution by the Orthodox Church. For the first time, their religious identity was explicitly protected under the law. Khalid and Abu Ubada, in their administrative oversight, were proving that their conquest was not about imposing a new faith, but about imposing a new, more equitable order. They were saving the people of Syria from the financial and theological tyranny of the distant emperor. The success of the northward push meant that the Muslim army was now deep inside the Byzantine heartland, supplied and supported by a network of newly allied Christian and Jewish communities, an absolute nightmare for Emperor Heraclius. The silence before the storm, the capture of Aleppo, marked the climax of the first phase of the Syrian campaign. The caliphate now controlled the entire economic and logistical spine of Syria, from Basra in the south to the outskirts of Antioch in the north. Khalid and Abu Ubada paused their advance at Aleppo. They knew the peace was temporary. Every quiet day they spent consolidating their gains was a day that Heraclius was spending in a fit of cold, calculated fury. The emperor, based in Antioch, was witnessing the irreversible disintegration of his empire. He was not a man to accept defeat. Intelligence reports flowing in from their new Ghassanid and former Byzantine allies were grim. Heraclius was gathering a final, colossal Hosten army of unprecedented size, drawn from every corner of the remaining empire. Armenians, Slavs, Goths, Arabs, and the cream of the imperial heavy legions were being marshaled. This would not be a skirmish or a siege. This would be the final, desperate struggle to reclaim the entire province. The forces gathered would be so immense, so heavily armed, that the mobile guard and the veterans of the Ridda Wars would be utterly dwarfed. Khalid stood on the walls of the newly secured citadel of Aleppo, looking north toward the Taurus Mountains, the traditional gateway to the heart of the Roman Empire. The silence of the night carried the weight of impending doom. He knew that the strategic victories of the last year were merely a prologue. The great army of the Caliphate had advanced far, secured powerful alliances, and established a just rule, but now they would have to fight for their lives. The threat of the iron chain, the fury of Heraclius, the news that trickled into Antioch and then to the imperial court, the defeat at Ajanan, the loss of Damascus, the defection of Homs, and the ultimate fall of the impregnable citadel of Aleppo was not just a military setback. It was an existential humiliation. Emperor Heraclius had spent decades restoring the shattered dignity of the Roman Empire after the Persian Wars, only to see the vital rich province of Syria dissolve in less than 2 years to a force he considered nothing more than desert raiders. He was not merely angry. He was seized by a cold, calculating fury. He understood that the issue was no longer about border security. It was about the survival of the empire itself. Syria was the treasury, the agricultural heartland, and the bridge to Egypt. From his court in Antioch and his headquarters in Edessa, Heraclius began to gather every available man and resource from the remaining corners of his domain. He stripped garrisons from Anatolia, emptied the forts along the Persian border, and levied troops from the diverse peoples under the imperial banner. This was to be the grand army host intended not just to defeat the Arabs, but to wipe them out completely, reclaiming every mile of lost ground and restoring the moral authority of Rome. The colossal host, the resulting army, was massive, a kaleidoscope of imperial power that dwarfed any force seen in the Levant for generations. Its sheer scale was intended to crush the morale of the smaller, lighter Muslim force before a sword was even drawn. Historians estimate the Byzantine army numbered well over 100,000 men, 5 times the size of the combined Muslim force. It was structured into distinct, powerful corps. The Iron Legions, the corps, or the Scali and Exercitus, orientalize Shivi infantry from the Roman provinces, disciplined, armored, and equipped with massive shields and long spears. Armenian vanguard, thousands of elite Armenian cavalry, highly mobile and renowned for their shock charges. Slavic mercenaries, a large contingent of Slavic and Gothic soldiers recruited from the Balkans and Black Sea regions, renowned for their ferocity and physical size. Arab auxiliaries, a significant contingent of loyalist Christian Arabs, including tribes that had not defected. Led by the Ghassanid chieftain, Jabala ibn Aliham, who felt a deep personal loyalty to the emperor. This was conventional, professional, heavy warfare on a scale that the lightly armored Muslim army used to fast skirmishes and cavalry charges could barely imagine. Vahan, the master strategist to command this diverse and colossal machine. Heraclius appointed Vahan, an Armenian nobleman and a man of great military and political authority. Vahan was not a reckless general. He was patient, calculating, and fully aware of the disaster that had befallen previous commanders who underestimated the Arabs' mobility. Vahan's strategy was twofold. First, use overwhelming numbers to prevent the Arabs from employing their fluid, flanking tactics. And second, secure an open battlefield where the weight of his armored infantry could grind the enemy down. He intended to drive the Muslims back south until they were trapped between his army and the desert, forcing them to fight on his terms. The sheer size of Vahan's army made its advance slow and deliberate, moving like an irresistible geological force. The Muslim commanders watched its approach with growing dread, knowing that a direct confrontation at Aleppo or Homs would be suicide. The infamy of the chained men. Vahan's most terrifying military innovation was born out of his understanding of the Arabs' greatest weapon, speed and morale. The Muslim cavalry, Particularly, Khalid's mobile guard excelled at feigned retreats, flanking maneuvers, and rapid regrouping tactics that often caused Byzantine infantry lines to panic and break. To counteract this, Vahan introduced the concept of the chained men, often referred to as al-Salisala, or the Iron Chain, by the Arabs. He ordered large contingents of his heavy infantry, likely tens of thousands of men, primarily Slavs and Armenians, to be shackled together by the ankle in units of 10 to 20 men. The military logic was brutally simple. Unbreakable front, the chained formation created a massive, fixed phalanx that could not be outflanked by the fast Muslim cavalry. If one man died, the others held him up, ensuring the line remained intact. No retreat. Most critically, the chains ensured that no soldier could flee. Panic, the great undoing of earlier Byzantine forces, was chemically impossible. Fear of death was replaced by the terrifying certainty that they must stand and fight or die together. For the lightly equipped Muslim soldiers, this tactic was a psychological nightmare. They were accustomed to seeing their enemy break and run after a devastating charge. Now, they would face a solid wall of human flesh and iron that seemed to advance with relentless, inhuman purpose. As the fires fade over Aleppo and the night settles across the desert, remember, history's greatest storms often begin in silence. If you found peace in tonight's story, let your support keep the calm alive. Gently tap subscribe, leave a like, and share this journey with someone who drifts into sleep with stories of the past. You've been listening to Boring Bedtime, where we drift into calm.